This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Tuesday. How's everybody doing today? We got an interesting one on tap for you today, but before we get there, let's talk a little bit of junk silver, shall we? Well, I tell you what, actually, I'm going to tie in a little bit of Brett Olen today because he's talking about some pretty wild things behind the scenes when it comes to the financial system. And if after this you're like, this is unnerving, then maybe it's time to get a little junk silver in your pocket, in your vault, in your closet, under your bed. I don't know where you store it, wherever you store it, or just any precious metals at all. And all you got to do is go down in the show notes, text or email Grahame for details about today's feature, which is on junk silver, old coins, older circulation coins, that is, like dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars from back before our government debased our money by removing the silver from the coinage. Or, of course, you know, if you got questions around selling, storing, using retirement accounts to invest in precious metals, or just buying, just straight old buying, text Grahame. Or any, you're on sgb.com.ca, Silver Gold Bull. You just make sure that you let them know that you heard about them from the SNP. Helps me, helps them, helps you. Profit River. Well, to all the hunters out there, I was just talking to a guy right before I walked in here, and he was talking about how the gophers are out. The gophers are out on top of the snow. Never a better time to get out and about and maybe do a little gopher hunting. And I was like, oh, well, when you go in to buy your 22 shells, just make sure you let them know about the podcast, SMP. That's the promo code you got to use, and you're entered for $100. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. So to all you fantastic listeners out there, if you're in Lloyd, that's one thing. Make sure you walk in the store, and on any purchase, you just say, hey, could we put that under SNP? And that's going to get you tossed in for a $100 gift card from the store. If you're anywhere online and you're buying something online, anywhere in Canada, remember to put in SMP or over the phone, SMP. All your questions, direct them to Joel at smp@profitriver.com. That's down in the show notes as well. He can answer all your questions. So just go to profitriver.com for everything, folks. They're the major retailer of firearms, accessories, and optics, and they serve all of Canada. RecTech Power Products. For the past 20 years, they've been committed to excellence in the power sports industry. And I was just talking to a guy about ice fishing. Now, I mean, obviously, you're not taking a Lund boat on the ice, but they do have Lund boats in there. The Cadillac of the fishing boats, you can pretty much customize it any which way you want. Ryan was showing me all the different ways in my brain. I'm like, oh man, this is a lot, but you can do whatever you want. And they've been working on this for over 6 years. So stop into the west side of Lloydminster, see their showroom. If you're a fisher, that is, if you like fishing. Chances are you're pretty excited at the fact that Lloydminster now has Lund boats out of RecTech, and they got a whole bunch of other things. Golf season's just around the corner. Go take a look at some of their golf carts. You want to be top notch on the old lawnmower? They got those too. They got a whole bunch of stuff. My favorite right now is if you go to the multiplex here in Lloyd. Sorry, got hockey on the mind. I guess we got hockey practice today. They got the Defender sitting in there. Kids love to climb on that thing. And that's probably like fantastic advertising for them. If you're one of those parents walking through, if you like the look of that Defender, stop out to RecTech and get them to let you test drive one of those suckers. Oh, baby. Let them know I sent you, too. That's RecTech Power Products. They're open Monday through Saturday. And for further details, either stop in or visit them at rectechpowerproducts.com. PlanetCom, when it comes to running a busy, growing business, I can relate. Trying to stay on top of ever-changing world of information technology can be overwhelming. That is saying it lightly. And they want to take care of that for you, leaving you to do your thing while they do theirs. For over 22 years, PlanetCom has been there to boost your productivity by proactively managing every aspect of your IT infrastructure, both in-house and in the cloud. And this ensures you're not too tangled up in technology to get anything done. So go to planetcom.ca. They're going to help you with websites, you name it, IT, infrastructure, cloud. I don't even know what that means, cloud. I don't know, maybe I should talk to them about that. All that jazz that you're like, I don't have the brain capacity to worry about. Yeah, Carl and team can take care of you. Substack, free to subscribe to. Sunday nights at 5 p.m. And then for paid subscribers, we've been doing the debrief. So you're getting a little instant access to after every interview, which has been interesting, I think. I think people have been enjoying it. I think I've been enjoying it. It's kind of healthy, to be honest. I've been really enjoying the feedback from all the listeners. The new studio is coming along. So if you want to be a part of that, skills, labor, materials, monies. Monies. Money. Anyways, the monies. Anyways, value for value. We got a wall being built in there as well, and look forward to putting your name on it, your company logo on it. You get it, and I want you to be a part of this because a lot of you certainly have been here for a long time. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to retweet this section. Make sure to do it all. Appreciate all of you fine folks. Now, if you haven't bought your ticket to the Cornerstone Forum, I don't know what you're doing. I think we're at 39 days today. 39 days, just over a month. And just go down, scroll down in the show notes. I'm telling you, we're all talking about this election. 2 weeks after it, a little less than that, we're going to be all meeting in Calgary, and we get to talk about a whole lot. All right, let's get on to the tail of the tape. He's the president and CEO of Bow Valley Credit Union. I'm talking about Brett Oland. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brett Olen. Sir, thanks for hopping on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've got a black shirt on to please Twos. He's very concerned about my attire in just about every video I put out. So, this one's...
Well, he was, for the listener who doesn't understand, you remember when Mark Kearney and that whole gang of people, Justin Trudeau, everybody started wearing this gray shirt? Brett Olen puts out a video and he's wearing a gray shirt. Twos is like, is he trying to signal something here? Anyways, we thought it was rather clever. That's I'm glad you're taking Twos into account.
I probably shouldn't, but anyway.
Interesting times these days. You wrote a paper and that paper started to blow up, and I don't know. Walk us through this whole thing. I had a conversation with Tom Luongo. He talked, I think, about different little things in your paper, not specifically because you've written the paper after, but there were things going on there. Walk me through this, and we'll see if we can make sense to the
Sure,
layman.
yeah, and absolutely credit where credit is due. I leveraged a lot of Tom Luongo's work with this. It's very Canada, Alberta-centric from my perspective of what's happening. And I think, Tom covers a lot of worldly issues, but of course, because we both live in Alberta, we're more focused on Alberta and Canada, and he plunks out ideas, and, the good people that are sort of listening to what he has to say sort of leverages those materials to try and make a difference where they are. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with this open letter that I basically crafted earlier this month.
Well, what was it about Tom, right? Like, man, when I go back to that chat, I'm trying to wrap my brain around bond markets and the fact that, in certain banks, you can leverage person's money 10 times, and another it's infinity. I'm like, I don't even make sense of half of it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I got the lovely listener and others that are smarter than me. What was it that when Tom's walking everybody through it, what stuck out to you? And you're like, holy crap, he might be right here.
Yeah, this probably started about 3 years ago. And Tom is very good at that, is putting forth these ideas, and all of a sudden I get aha moments and I go, holy moly. And specifically it was around the Libor and the Sofur. And what I've really done with this open letter, and there was a subsequent article that's written on it, and then podcasts like this, is try and put it in terms that people can understand and relate to, because a lot of the times Tom's speaking over people's heads. Unless you have a significant amount of financial background, you just glaze over with this stuff. So
you're literally speaking about me. I'm like, uh-huh.
Yep. Well, and so that's what this attempt was to do. Is really it was an open letter to try and wake up specifically Alberta politicians about what I think is going on, but also in a general sense Canadians as well. And I don't think it's any surprise that um, they come out with these things that just completely gaslight people. It's like you saw the turn from the Trudeau administration, the Liberals are getting kicked out of power. All of a sudden, the tone completely changes, and it's elbows up and Team Canada and whatever that means, and the 180 that Canadians have seemed to taken on that, and it's this is an attempt to basically ground people in the fact, no, the enemy's still at the gates here. We need to pay attention to these things and not get sidetracked by what in my mind is a clearly propaganda-based, feed to the Canadian public.
Yeah, well, fair enough. But I guess I keep coming back to it. I'm like, okay, so you have an aha moment. You look at Tom Luongo. He rattles off a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, to a financial mind, what he's talking about makes sense. What is it that he said that you're like, that makes sense?
Well, okay, so why don't I put this in the terms that just everyday language and see where we get with there. And then I can,
Sure.
If you want, I've got some slides that can walk it through for more visual people and really try and help people get their hands around what I think we're dealing with here. So firstly, it's important to note that the Western world, in my opinion, is going through a sovereign debt crisis. And what that means in just everyday terms is that the Western world is broke. We're not producing enough income or return to basically service all the debt out there of all these promises that the Western world has made to specifically, I think, the baby boomers, because a lot of these came about during the age of the baby boomer. But also they continue to double down on throwing money at the problem, and it's no longer going to work anymore. There's just not enough collateral or income to be able to service this debt. And so I think what's happening is you're really, everything goes along hunky-dory while everybody can make their payments and support their people and their citizens. But the moment it comes to a time where this debt is just an overwhelming burden to everyone around the Western world, they start pointing fingers and they start dividing up into different blocks around the world. And you see that, right? You see the world in the United States, they're split down the middle of direction. You see it over in Europe in a different block of they're getting torn apart at the seams over there. You see Russia basically trying to walk away from the entire Western world and say, I don't want to deal with this problem. You see China scrambling for, access to resources and direction for the world. And it's not a real surprise to me, and I'm sure your listeners are familiar with The Fourth Turning, the book that's out there. And these types of things happen every 100, 125 years, where the world basically needs to reset. And I think this is one of those times. And typically, during one of these, I hate using the term reset, but that's exactly what we're sort of going through. And typically the Europeans who have been in control of the situation in the past drag us to war. And so, wouldn't you know it, we're about 100 years away from, in between World War I and World War II. And in my mind, those big wars were, in a large part, operations to basically reset the system so they can get away with printing massive amounts of currency to basically hide the malfeasance that they've done countless times over in the past of governments overpromising their citizens, being able to undeliver because of too much debt. We need to reset the system. And so it's not a surprise to me that the Europeans continue to play their playbook of trying to drag us to war. And really what's happening now is with the Trump administration saying, no more. We're not doing this system and this cycle of dragging a bunch of young people to war and basically blowing up half the world. And so just so you elites or whatever you want to call them can reset the system and get away scot-free with all this financial malfeasance that you've produced in the past. So.
Okay. So when it comes to dragging us off to war and everything else, I sit here and I go, like, I can just see it trying to play out. Instead of just people, I don't know. Some days I think grown-ups, other days I just like, I don't know if that even fits. I'm just like, peace. Let's get to peace. Let's stop all the, what you're pointing to is that it's an underlying issue of debt, of money issues, and that's why they're pushing so hard for war. Mm-hmm. Enter Carney. How does Carney fit into this plan?
Okay, so why don't I sort of walk through it step by step, and I've got some notes here, just make sure I don't miss anything, and you'll sort of see the pictures come into clearer view, if you will. So, as we all know, the U.S. has the world reserve currency, and as the U.S. has the world reserve currency, all the commodities around the world are priced in U.S. dollars, specifically oil, because whether the greenies like it or not, oil is the most important commodity that is around the world. Still, a significant amount of dollars are sloshed around the world because of oil and gas.
If I may, and I'm gonna butcher this, and
sure.
I should just let you talk, but I'm like, I want to make sure my brain gets it. Mm-hmm. When we say the world reserve currency, the reason why oil is paid in U.S. dollars and other people use U.S. dollars is trust in that currency, that it actually means what the paper is printed on, correct?
Yes, and there's also a social agreement that oil will be priced in U.S. dollars, and that stems from the 1971 petrodollar system, where the U.S. basically went to Saudi Arabia, who was the biggest marginal producer of oil at the time, and basically said, hey, we'll give you protection from Israel, and if you price your oil in U.S. dollars. And Saudi Arabia agreed to those terms, and at the time, it was very significant, the amount of oil that Saudi Arabia had. It was, enough to basically throw weight around on the system. If they priced their Saudi Arabia priced it in Russian ruble, all of a sudden we'd be living under a different standard than we are today, because that's how much money is actually sloshing around the world because of this very important commodity, oil. So,
what was it priced in before 71?
The oil?
Oil.
I think it was a mixed bag of a number of different things, and so, but it's really the Saudis accepting U.S. dollars. So the Saudis could have accepted whatever at the time, a Swiss franc for the oil, and then they'd throw it into their reserves, or they could have accepted a German mark or something like that and put it into the reserves. But Saudi Arabia announcing to the world, no, we're going to basically use the medium exchange of the US dollar and stick all these oil contracts in US dollars. And what happened was the Saudis then recycled all those US dollars that they got into US treasuries. And so what happens was, when you're getting billions and trillions of dollars worth of U.S. dollars worth of spending money, you can't just stick it in a checking account, right? You have to stick it in something that basically is going to earn a return. And at the time, what started down that path, and we've been under for 40, 50 years, is that they'd recycle all those US dollars into US treasuries that were earning a certain amount of interest on them. Now, about in 2014, the world started to change, and countries like Russia, China, Saudi Arabia started waking up to the fact that the US was just continuing to print more and more US dollars, basically devaluing the currency, the US dollar, by the tune of about 8% per year. So now, if a US Treasury is only paying 5%, and your underlying currency, the US dollar, is getting devalued by 8% per year, basically you're losing 3% per year just because you're using these US Treasuries. And so what did we see right around 2014 was that China quit buying US Treasuries. For the most part, Russia stopped buying US Treasuries. Saudi Arabia was on a bit of a different path, but has now, for the large part, quit buying US Treasuries because they recognize that the fiscal problem that the US is in, and if your savings are just going to be constantly undermined by a country in a foreign region printing to high heaven that currency, then you're going to stop saving in that currency. Make sense?
Yeah, I'm keeping up. I think I'm just
Okay.
like I'm if I don't say anything, it's because I don't want to interrupt your train of thought as you walk me through all the things. I'm
Sure.
just when I interrupted at the start on the reserve currency, I want to make sure that I'm starting at the right point and not getting my brain, making sure my brain, and I assume others, we're all seeing the world for how this is playing out. Carry on.
Sounds good.
2014. Okay, things start to move in a different direction. Russia, China, and other things are starting to shake out where they're like, this doesn't make any sense anymore.
Yep.
Grown-ups on the other side of the world, they're like, we're losing money this way, and we're being basically influenced off of a money printing machine that is the United States.
Correct. Yeah. And they basically look at that and think of it in terms of you in your money in a bank account. So if you have $100 in your bank account and you know for a fact that they're going to print another 10%, say, of currency in a year, and everything's going to be worth basically 10% less in your savings account every year, you're going to do something about it, right? You're either going to find a different investment, or you're going to spend it, or you're going to do something to basically combat that if you know that. And that's really what the situation is in foreign countries. They look at these not billions, but trillions of dollars in debt that basically your dollars are being devalued at 8% per year. You're going to do something about it, right?
Correct. Yes.
So now let's level set again. So the US dollar has the world reserve currency. Commodities around the world, specifically oil, are priced in US dollars. The next step to understand is that Europe has a very poor currency. So the euro, Europe in general doesn't produce much. They don't have any energy reserves. They have massive social programs. And the important thing to note is, because the US dollar is still the reserve currency, they need to pay for all these commodities for their citizens in US dollars still. It's not like they can, there isn't much of it where they can go, hey, we've got this euro, we want to buy some oil from you, Saudi Arabia, in euros. And Saudi Arabia has made that agreement with the United States and basically would be shooting themselves into the foot with the United States if they started pricing things in euros, right? So now enter Russia, that had significant amounts of oil and gas that they were selling to Europe, and they were starting to do it in Europe. in euros, and so starting to make those trades in euros, and it's in all likelihood that the United States started looking at something like that and saying, we're losing control of the system. If Europe starts buying oil and gas in a currency that they can print, all of a sudden the risk of the world dominance of the US dollar is at risk here, right? So the key is the Americans can print US dollars. Nobody else in the world should be able to print US dollars. Correct?
Correct.
Right. So because Europe's massive social programs, if the price of US debt is too high, that causes a big problem for Europeans, because they still need to buy all this oil and gas and these products and services in US dollars. And we just went over why they can't print them to high heaven like the Americans can. Basically, what they have to do is take on more and more US denominated debt to be able to purchase all these commodities around the world. And so Europe recognizes the problem that they're in. They need to pay for all these products and services in US dollars. They can't get access to enough US dollars. So they basically create debt in US dollars. And this is exactly what's termed the euro-dollar system is. And so the euro-dollar system is effectively creating US dollars outside of the United States. So there's a country, let's call Germany. They need to buy oil and gas from Saudi Arabia or other parts of the world. They need US dollars to do that. They don't have enough US dollars in their bank account, so they basically create US dollars within Germany debt. So they sell a bond and it's denominated in US dollars. So they sell that bond to the greater market to basically capture US dollars so they can pay for that oil that they want from Russia or, say, Saudi Arabia. Follow me?
I'm going to ask a bunch of dumb questions.
Sure.
Okay. You're sitting in Europe.
Yep.
And you want to buy oil.
Yep.
Because you need oil to heat your house, et cetera, to all the products you make, et cetera. Okay?
Yep.
Like there's a whole bunch of things that come off of oil and gas that your people need.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't operate in US dollars. You operate in the euro dollar.
Yes.
So you have to, in my mind, you're changing in your euro dollar for American dollars.
Right.
In order to buy the oil.
Yes. So yeah, that's something you've tripped on something there. So the euro, if you're selling, say you need to sell not just billions but trillions of dollars in euro to buy US dollars. What happens is there's more demand for US dollars, so the price of US dollars basically strengthens, and the euro basically declines and weakens. And so over time, all of a sudden, print more and more and more euros because it gets weaker and weaker and weaker.
Yeah, but then your dollar gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So how do you keep your dollar? Right. So this is, I guess, and maybe this is what you're trying. I don't know. I'm like, if I'm sitting in Europe, I understand the need for the US dollar because I have to pay for it. Very strategic move by the United States. One might say brilliant, because now everybody has to compete with you. And as they do, they're strengthening your dollar at all times. So no matter what you do, you still have to buy the American dollar to have a civilization of where we are. So you can understand why dealing with Russia and others that become, even Canada, you would have thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep your dollar strong against the US dollar? What can they do?
And that's exactly what they're doing with this, what's termed the euro dollar system. So rather than printing countless amounts of euros to basically weaken your dollar and strengthen the US dollar. What they do is issue US denominated debt. And all of a sudden, you can pay for all those commodities, especially oil, in US dollars. But here's the crux of it. You actually have to pay back that debt in US dollars. So it's a bit of a shell game of you need to be able to pay back the debt and the coupons in US dollars.
This is where we come to, I feel like, the Libor versus the Sofur, correct?
Yes, correct.
And now, refresh my memory, the Libor is the European-controlled one, or is that the American one now?
Yes, so it stands for the London Interbank Offer Rate is what Libor stands for. And so since about the 1950s, because all the U.S. debt was based off of Libor, it's basically like the tail wagging the dog. It's all the European nations basically saying, hey, I don't care about the strength and the weakness of the euro versus the US dollar and pricing commodities and things like that. Because you know what? We control the price of those dollars. So as the social contract is basically broken in Europe and they keep on spending more and more and more money, the problem gets worse and worse and worse, right? So they want to basically push the cost of US dollars lower and lower and lower. And to be able to do that, you have to have control of the pricing mechanism, and that is Libor, right? So if you're able to sort of price the cost of money, you can print those trillions of euros to basically suppress the price of the US dollar, and basically the tail wags the dog is effectively what it is. And so back in 2021, 2022,
because they're effectively issuing US debt, correct?
yes. But the thing is, they're controlling the price of it with Libor.
with US debt, because what they're doing is they're issuing. Forgive me. This is where I can just hear financial people going like, Shaun, just figure it out. But I feel like there's a whole bunch of us trying to like race at the speed of a light train.
No, ask away. Yep.
Well, I'm just like, okay. So they're trying. Yeah, everything's priced in US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you print, the more your currency gets devalued. It goes down, and now you can afford less.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to find a way to bridge the gap there.
Correct. Exactly.
And so by finding a way to print essentially more US dollars abroad, you're bringing down the price of the US dollar, which makes it more in line with the euro dollar, which means you can afford this. I'm like, this is shadow games within shadow games, Brett. This is why my brain is like, okay, I'm trying to grapple with all you're bringing up.
Yeah, no, and exactly. So if you could basically, outside of the system, create as much money as you wanted to. So you personally, Shaun, say, you know what? I don't really like paying 5% for my mortgage. You know what? I want that rate lower. If you have control of the switches in the background and can basically, I'm going to talk to my buddies in London and over in Europe, and we're just going to print to high heaven all those dollars. So you know what? I can actually manipulate the system enough to control the price of that mortgage that I have there. And I'm going to push the rate of that mortgage down to say 3% instead of 5%. That's exactly what they're doing is basically trying to goose the system to a point where they're controlling the dollars of the US pricing, US dollar pricing.
It's a world that most of us would never even dig into, you know?
No, because it's complicated and it's made to be that way, right? So
2022, carry on with your analysis here.
So I think it was 2022 that really I was struggling, and this sort of where Tom Luongo's work intersects with mine. I was looking for, I had a question in my mind, and it's like, why is the U.S. raising rates here? This doesn't make sense. And I had a whole thesis behind basically inflation, printing to high heaven, goosing the system, and enter Tom Luongo, and he put this idea in my head that maybe Jerome Powell, who's the chair of the Federal Reserve, is on, let's just call it, our side versus the globalist side. And then all of a sudden, I had it in my head that Jerome Powell was basically on the same side as Davos and the elite and whatever you want to call them, right? And it didn't make sense that Jerome Powell was raising rates to basically cut off this system to make US dollars more expensive. And so Tom put it in my head that basically, no, maybe he's on our side. Maybe he's on that libertarian side that basically wants to squash Davos and the elite. And by raising rates, it basically, all the capital started to flood back to the United States because capital goes where it's treated best, right? So if you have a financial institution and you're like, hey, you know what, I got $1,000, I want to put it in a GIC. Are you going to go to the bank that offers you 3% or the one that offers you 5%? It's not a trick question.
No, it's 5%.
Right. So
I'm literally writing this down because I'm like it's 100%. I'm like if Canada gets a prime minister who allows capital to come in and thrive, you watch how our country is going to go. If we go the opposite way here in less than a month, you watch how capital flees. We've already had it flee once or multiple times under Justin Trudeau. Carry on.
Yes. And so you nailed it. And we'll get into that a little later about the direction of that with Canadian politicians. So that's exactly what Jerome Powell did. He basically signaled to the world, no, move your capital over here to the United States. And basically what it happens is it drains the euro-dollar system. So if Europe can't support all this trillions of dollars in debt that they've basically put out there in US dollars, they have a big, big problem, right? So basically they wouldn't be able to service their debt in US dollars because all the capital starts flying out of Europe, right? So now
I'm not going to ask it. You carry on and I'll ask my dumb questions a little later on.
And so Trump recognized the problem with the euro-dollar system and basically the tail wagging the dog in his first term and started the process of moving to a new overnight lending rate. And so he saw Libor and said, wait a minute, why is London controlling the price of US dollars? And with the help of the people around him, I'm sure, came up with this new system called Sofur, the secured overnight financing rate, which is priced in the United States, which is critical. You don't want US dollars priced over in London. You want it priced over in the United States. And what he did with the help of Jerome Powell in, I think it was 2022, 2023, is they moved the Sofur rate 5 basis points, which is 0.05% above the Libor rate. So again, capital is going to move to where it's treated best. So it started flowing out of the Libor priced funds into the Sofur price rate funds. And so effectively, Jerome Powell started this process of recapitalizing the United States way back in 2022, 2023. And capital started flowing out of Europe and into the United States. Follow me?
Yeah, I do. Why can't, just dumb question. I guess I'm full of them today when I get into this realm. Why can't and I'm going to space on it, is the Libor. Mm-hmm. Why can't the Libor go up 0.05 above what Sofur did? Why can't they just play that game?
They can play that game to a certain extent, but all of a sudden the market wakes up and says, you know what? Europe is in rough shape. Its economy is garbage. You've got all these social programs you're going to pay for. And basically, all of a sudden it catches up to them and they're going to be playing that game of trying to out-capitalize the United States. Sure, they could say, oh, you know what? We're going to start paying 6% on our debt instead of the Americans 5.5 or 4.3, I think it is around today for 10-year debt. But the problem is if they've got so much debt outstanding, they can't make the coupon payments on those trillions of dollars that are outstanding, right? So they're
not to mention the United States is a reserve currency, which means they have money flowing in at all times, correct? Like they're almost playing with a rigged deck.
They can print it too. So if you have debt denominated in, well, it doesn't matter what, but say you have $100,000 outstanding in US and dollars, and you need to make those coupon payments or those interest payments in US dollars, and say it's $1,000 a month in US dollar payments, you can't outcompete and basically say, oh, you know what, I'm going to pay $2,000 US a month now, because the thing is, you just don't have enough products and services that Europe is producing that they can actually service this debt. So now the same thing happens with Libor and Sofur. It's, yeah, sure, they could try and compete with Sofur on those rates, but they'd very quickly go bankrupt if
well, I mean, but it's you're competing against something where the game isn't rigged, but it's almost rigged, because the U.S. can literally, because of the cards they have or options they have on their side of the table, it's like, you want to go up? Sure, we'll go up, because they can print and then print some more because of the position they have in the global economy.
Right, but the thing is that the game works on, say, Davos's side when there's politicians in the United States that are letting this happen, right?
Sure.
So if you basically got people on both sides of the game board, then like you've seen in the past 50 years when this Euro-dollar system started, you can basically manipulate it to.
Is there another way they could manipulate it?
Yes.
By like USAID or USAID, right?
Yes.
Giving away American dollars from the Canadian American taxpayer through the government. Hey, you want American dollars here? How about we give you $200 million and you go deal with gender, whatever. And we're never going to follow up with any of this jargon or climate or whatever. And you can filter that back through your economy, et cetera, et cetera. And now you have American dollars ready to go.
Yes. And so I think Trump understands this. I think Vance understands this. I think Powell, who's the chair of the Fed, understands this. And I think Bessent, who's the Secretary of Treasury in the United States, understands this. And basically said, if you cut off the flow of US dollars through this change from Libor to Sofur, and then things like US aid, you're basically cutting off the ability of the Europeans to fund their debt in US dollars. And that's exactly what is happening.
Okay. I actually follow that now. So if you're Europe, what do you do then?
You find another sucker at the card table that's willing to basically take up the charge.
Which
Enter
becomes
Mark
Canada.
Carney. Yes. And so I'm sure you've gone over it a little bit, but Mark Carney used to be the governor of the Bank of Canada and, more importantly, the governor of the Bank of England, where the Libor rate is set, right? So you enter in somebody like Mark Carney, who understands this whole Euro-dollar system, and you create a new sucker at the card table to basically try and start something in Canada like they've done with the Euro-dollar system. So I'm terming this the Loonie-Dollar System, is effectively the same thing that they tried to do with the Euro-dollar system. Denominate US dollar debt that's paid for by Canadians, and the timing around this is just, it's too close to be coincidental. And I can sort of go through the timing of that. So
yeah, sure, please do.
March 9th, 2025. All these are in 2025. March 9th, 2025, Carney voted in by 150,000 votes. And you know the story about 250,000 of those $450,000 votes basically being eliminated. And so he basically gets installed.
For anyone not up to speed, the night before the results, 250,000, I don't know, were there some bots in there? I'm sure. But 250,000 registered members of the Liberal Party knocked off. They're not going to allow those to come in. So he's voted in off the remaining 150,000, of which I think it's 120 voted for Mark Carney to be the next leader of the Liberal Party. And at that time, Prime Minister of Canada.
Right. So installed Carney. The very next day, March 10th, the Department of Finance issues a statement that they're going to issue U.S. denominated debt. March 11th, Canada actually issues that U.S. denominated debt. March 14th, Mark Carney is sworn in. March 17th, the morning of, Carney met with Macron in Paris, he's the Prime Minister of Paris, and in the evening he met with Mark Carney met with King Charles and Keir Starmer, who's the Prime Minister of the UK. And so, to me, it's this game is it's way too coincidental that they're issuing this U.S. denominated debt. They're basically going over, before even Carney goes to talk to Trump, he's over in Europe talking to the Europeans. Like, what that doesn't make sense to me. If the biggest risk to Canada, like he says, is the tariffs on Canada, why is he running over to Europe to kiss the king of the ring, or the a ring of the king? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so what's important to note about the Libor and London, specifically the city of London, is they have the ability to infinitely rehypothecate. And so that's a $10 word, but what basically rehypothecation means is you have a base layer of something, some collateral you have a base layer of, and then you can basically leverage it up 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times to basically continue to roll out different things on top of that. So there are rules against this in Canada and the United States, but there's no rule around infinite rehypothecation in the city of London over in the Bank of England. So Faisal and I have had a back and forth about this, and says, well, we only issued $3.5 billion. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's too small to basically have the tail wag the dog. Now, if you're able to basically infinitely rehypothecate it over in the Bank of England, all of a sudden you're a different story. All of a sudden you can turn that debt issued about $3.5 billion into 35 billion, into 350 billion, into 3.5 trillion. Effectively the same thing that they did with the Euro-Dollar system, except you're using the base layer of Canada to be able to do that. So now the big crux of all of this is, as we've seen with US aid and the movement from Libor to Sofur, drain the US dollars out of Europe and basically say, no, we're not letting you play this game anymore and manipulating the US dollar. We're not letting it happen, type thing. If Canada attempts to create this Loonie-Dollar system, with Trump and Bessent and Powell and Vance having an understanding of this, they're basically going to crush it within Canada before it even gets going, and hence the tariffs. And so if you can't get access to US dollars, then the system basically dies on its feet. And so I think there's a bigger game at play with the tariffs. And if this proves out, specifically around April 2nd, Trump will basically double down on his tariffs talks on Canada to basically snuff out the Loonie-Dollar system before it can even get going. And so we've heard a lot of rhetoric around, I had a great conversation with President Trump and a very productive meeting with Mark Carney, that type of thing. We'll see. We'll see what happens actually here on April 2nd. If Trump tries to eliminate this trade deficit with Canada on April 2nd, then he's basically snuffing out this Loonie-Dollar System, what Carney was trying to create within Canada to perpetuate this notion of the tail wagging the dog, or Canadian rather than Europeans basically controlling the price of US dollars.
And the importance of April 2nd is?
Well, Trump calls it American Liberation Day, is what he calls it. And so that's long thought, well, not long thought, but the last number of weeks thought is he's going to announce some significant tariffs on the world on April 2nd, including Canada.
And walk me back through it one more time. I'm like, some days my brain catches everything, and other days I'm like, why can't it just pick up on that last part? Walk me back through April 2nd. If Donald Trump does X, this is what you believe it means.
So currently, Canada has a trade surplus, which means that there's more U.S. dollars flowing into Canada than U.S. dollars flowing out of Canada, right? Okay. So Tom puts that...
Which makes kind of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure, especially with oil and gas. Because
I mean, think of all the resources we got, and then think of our population.
Yes,
we're a high producing. We have to be the envy of like a huge chunk of the world because
we should
of the ability.
Much farther ahead.
Yes, we should. Yes, we should. Yes, we should. But you think of all the resources we're shipping to everywhere, and then you think the size of our population. It's like we should be like that pretty much with any place in the world. We should be shipping out way more than we're bringing in. Now, carry on.
Yeah. So. As mentioned, the Trump administration is wise to this game. If we can actually service the debt on what I'm terming the Loonie-Dollar System, basically everything that they've done before, moving Libor to Sofur, cutting off US AID, is all for naught, because then all of a sudden they lose control of the pricing of the US dollars again. And so my idea is that the Trump administration will never let this happen. They just basically got control back over the pricing of the US dollar system. They are not going to let it slip away again. And so hence, if you put high enough tariffs on Canadian goods, then that trade surplus disappears. So now you touched on it a bit there. The majority of the trade surplus with Canada has to do with oil and gas. And so how do you basically stop US revenue coming into the Canada from the United States if most of that is a trade surplus due to oil, without basically crushing the oil and gas industry? And this is why this was an open letter to the Alberta government, is basically you need to be aware that this is the system that Trump is trying to break. We need to be able to basically circumvent this somehow to eliminate the trade surplus, number one. And so he can continue to crush the Loonie-Dollar System. But the thing is, we need a solution that Alberta oil and gas can continue to flow. And so the idea of the open letter is that rather than taking payment in US dollars, for the Alberta government could take it in a different form. So my idea around it was that you sell the Americans the oil, the Alberta government collects their royalties in US dollars. You could immediately convert those US dollars into gold. And if you purchase them from the Americans, that stack of gold, you can actually reduce the trade surplus with Canada and the US. And so everybody's happy. The US dollar doesn't flow into the Loonie-Dollar System. We get our store of value in gold, and basically the oil keeps flowing. And what was really interesting is that the weekend after I wrote this paper, I think I wrote it on the 14th, the weekend after on the 14th, the Smith administration, the premier of Alberta, announced that they were going to accept royalty payments in bitumen, which is oil. So effectively, it's the same thing that I'm talking about here, but rather than keeping your store value in gold, you're actually keeping it in oil and gas revenue. But the key is to keep it out of the US dollars so it doesn't filter up into the Bank of Canada and the Treasury at the government level, so they can pay for this whole system.
Oh, once again, I hate apologizing, so this is the last time I'm going to do it, folks. Okay, apologize. Now,
I got some slides too, if it might help.
well, what you're saying is, in order to pay the 10-year bonds issued in U.S. currency, U.S. dollars, is we need the trade surplus so that we can pay it in U.S. dollars.
Correct.
So that we can facilitate that. Because as soon as we start having to pay in Canadian dollars, we have to transfer it over to American dollar, and like it all becomes like we're going to have to print off more Canadian dollars, it just becomes a whole crapshoot, I assume.
Correct.
So you need the trade surplus to facilitate the debt or the bonds.
So the interest payment on that debt.
Thank you.
Yes.
The interest payment. And the huge crux in that is the fact that a huge portion of the trade surplus actually comes from Alberta, which is kind of funny, through oil and gas that they hate and they want to get rid of. And yet, in order to facilitate this giant plan against the United States, they would need that to continue. So you issue this going, if we actually just don't take payment in U.S. dollars, the Canadian government can't use the U.S. dollar to then facilitate payment.
Correct.
Am I catching this so far?
You're bang on. Yep.
So they take payment in bitumen instead of, I got you, instead of the U.S. dollar, so the Canadian government can't take hold of that because it's a resource. Where does the bitumen? Okay, so you sit on this whole thing of bitumen. What do you do with it then?
Well, the thing is, what you do is you specifically what Smith talked about is actually selling it to the heavy refiners, right? So you only do it as you need it. So if say you need, you're sitting on reserves of $10 billion worth of bitumen.
Sure.
You just basically keep it in that store of value, but all of a sudden, hey, you know what? We've got this new hospital we need to pay for. We need $1 billion. Then you sell off that bitumen. It immediately gets converted into US dollars, but it's pegged and it's like earmarked. And it's like, no, we're spending it on this hospital. We're not doing anything with it other than building this hospital. So it doesn't get wrapped up into the system, and they can't use it to service the debt.
How does the Canadian government, if you just, so you're the you're the Alberta government, and let's just say you stayed on the US dollar, okay, for payment, and now you got $10 billion. Why is that different than keeping it in bitumen and spending it earmarked? Why can they get a hold of that first $10 billion if it's US dollars instead of if you keep it in bitumen and you only use it when necessary? Why what's the difference? Why can the Canadian government get their hands on the first but not the second?
I'll bring up a slide and it should help with this. Entire screen share. Can you see that come up there?
I cannot yet.
Share. Click share. Okay. Here we go.
Here we go. Add to stage. There we go. Okay. I can see everything now.
Okay, so this is exactly what happens in the euro-dollar system. We'll skip this for now because we'll move into the Canadian system that's happening right now. So that trade is happening with the majority of the trade surplus is in oil. So you see it in the oil company, and there's production of oil that goes into the U.S., and the U.S. dollars are sent to the oil company first. And so that oil company owes the Alberta government royalties. So it skims off those royalties and puts them in U.S. dollars into Alberta. And the oil company has expenses that they need to pay. But at the end of the day, if Alberta is collecting royalties in U.S. dollars and the oil company is collecting dollars in U.S., it all goes into the commercial banking sector. Once there's overnight settling, it goes into the Bank of Canada and then into the Canadian Treasury that can use it for those coupon payments for that debt that they issued in U.S. dollars. And so that is effectively what I'm terming the Loonie-Dollar System, is they have access to that US dollars.
So by holding it out of currency, what you're saying is the money in the banks doesn't all get compiled eventually into the Canadian Treasury where they can use it. Because
Correct.
if you store money in any bank, they can then lend off of it because there's money in there.
Correct.
So by holding it in bitumen, they actually lose it because it's not in the system. And when they go to use it, it's in and out of the system so fast that they can never actually lend against it.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So here's if you can see the slides again.
Thank goodness for the slide, folks, because that actually makes sense. Okay, carry on.
So what I proposed is actually the Alberta government could take those royalties, immediately convert them into gold, talk to the Trump administration, because it's very important to do that. If you don't do that, then basically they take it as an act of war that you're pricing things in other than the US dollar, especially oil, right? So you talk to them, maybe even buy the gold from them, and all of a sudden you reduce the trade surplus with the United States. So that helps, number one, and it gets out of the Canadian banking system. So they can't perpetuate the Loonie-Dollar System, number two, and the oil continues to flow. Because I have no doubt in my mind, if the Americans lose control of the dollar again, they will snuff out oil and gas in Alberta in a heartbeat, if it means risking losing control of the dollar system again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably the best scenario is if Alberta government basically purchases all the oil production, gets paid in royalties in bitumen or US dollars. They do the transactions with the United States. They can put all that oil production revenue as well as the royalty revenue into gold was my idea. So completely stays out of the commercial banking sector and basically snuffs out the Loonie-Dollar System. So oil continues to flow, and Trump gets what he wants, that he has control over his dollar system. The only people that lose in this scenario are Mark Carney and the globalists that want to perpetuate this Loonie-Dollar System and keep control over the US dollar.
Gold. Why can't they lend against gold? Is that because they took it off that a long time ago? And that's one of the things that's been the follow to gold? Because isn't gold, or is gold seen the same, I guess, in financial terms as bitumen? It's outside the system and it's just a store of value.
Well, I think it's even better than bitumen, because the thing is, it's more easily convertible in gold. And I would think that there's probably more people around the world that would accept gold for payment if push came to shove, versus, hey, do you want this drum of oil dropped off on your lawn type thing? So the bitumen, what Smith announced the weekend after this letter was issued, does the same thing. But the thing is, the idea with gold is more accepting around the world than I think bitumen would be, because the thing is, you need a heavy refiner to be able to upgrade the bitumen. Whereas gold, it's just universally recognized around the world as a store of value. Well,
I tell you what, for an hour, this has been about as hot and heavy as it's come. Brett Olen trying to make, I don't know, doing exactly what Tom and Alex do to me all the time. Where I'm like, I'm trying to hold on. I'm like, I better go back and re-listen. I do appreciate the graphs, though. That actually, when you see all the arrows, and you're like, oh, I see. You're getting it away from, because once again, when you're in the banking world, you can understand this problem from a certain set of eyes. When you're just a minion at the end of the banking system, where, like I have a little bit of interaction with banks, I don't understand the full scope of what you're talking about. It's almost not impossible, but you got to spend a lot of time talking and studying to get to where you're sitting, to where you understand the system playing out, especially on a world scale, right? And yep. I think you've done a fair job of bringing a lot of us, I think, I'm going to speak for a few people, up to where you think this is sitting. So April 2nd will be a day to watch. That's what I'm taking out of this.
Yeah, no, that it'll be really interesting if Trump sticks it to Carney and basically says, nope, tariffs. I think you'll know where he stands.
Doesn't that also cement, though? I don't know. Doesn't that also cement, if he does that? Man, the Team Canada is going to be thick. It's going to be thick.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the thing is, I'm almost even of the perspective that it really doesn't matter who wins. And I think that's an awful thing to say at this point. But um, it, depending on your perspective, if Carney gets in, I think it's almost getting to be a certainty that Alberta is going to be pissed off enough that they're going to want to detach from Canada. And what's really interesting is you might think, oh yeah, no, it's safe. There's enough voters in Alberta that will never go down that road. Oh, don't be so sure, because I bet you 80 to 90% of rural Albertans would just love to get out of the system. Even if it's 20 or 30% of the people in Calgary and Edmonton and the bigger cities want out, this will happen. And it's a simple vote. It's not a regional vote. And we're voting in just this area in Medicine Hat Brooks or this area in the Kananaskis. It's basically every vote counts for something, and I think there'd probably be enough to carry the day. So with Carney getting into power, I think it's going to start the impetus of that. With Poilievre getting into power, exactly what you talked about earlier, the way you get out of a sovereign debt crisis like Canada is in, the United States is in, as Europe is in, you need to ramp up the actual productivity of the country. And so what Poilievre has been saying, he's eliminating the capital gains tax on assets that you've had in the past if you reinvest them back into Canada. This will spark an absolute productivity boom in Canada if Poilievre gets in and carries through with these tax issues. And all of a sudden, the sovereign debt issue of Western nations disappears if you had that much productivity. And so that's exactly what Trump is trying to do in the United States, is create a productivity boom. And I think that's the direction that Canada needs to go down to get out of this mess that we're in. But all is part of it is basically detaching from Mark Carney and the globalists.
Brett, thanks for hopping on and doing this.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Anytime.